Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I was going for the longest title, and Shana beat me by 3 words. So, a couple of housekeeping things. Out on the share table, I have a matrix that I'm going to talk about, and also this fact sheet. And I have Cheryl Daniels and Corinne Pugh from Davie Resource Group, who's leading this research project here, to answer questions at the end of my presentation, or any time in the next few days. Speaker notes are not showing up, so I have to use my paper. Sorry about that. So before I jump into the research project itself, I just wanted to give context to some new people here on how we got to this point. So back in the 1990s, ODOT had a wildflower program that was really successful with the public, but unfortunately the project failed because, as they say, you don't know what you don't know. And we didn't concentrate enough on the site preparation, and that's a lesson that we've learned and continued on as our program has evolved. Then in 2011, after abandoning that program, we got together with Pheasants Forever and Ohio Department of Natural Resources to create our first roadside pollinator habitat project over in western Ohio. And that project was really successful, so we worked with Dawes Arboretum on projects in central and southern Ohio in 2014. And then to capture all the opportunity for new pollinator habitat out there, we helped form the Ohio Pollinator Habitat Initiative in 2015. And then in 2017, we created a standalone pollinator habitat program. So OPHI is really a partnership of more than 80 organizations that provide education, technical assistance, and on-the-ground conservation. Since 2015, OPHI has helped us develop our roadside seed mix. There were 5, and then helped us build out our statewide multiple award seed contract that Shana mentioned earlier that consists of more than 22 different mixes. And this site here was done, I'll get into some public-private partnerships here in a minute, but we did this with NWTF, and this is at the end of year 2. So why does ODOT care about habitat? And I know we don't want to spend a lot of time talking about the whys. We want to talk about, how we're doing things. But I think it's worth a mention. It really comes down for ODOT. It's good business. In the last 2 years, we've taken dozens of interchanges off the plates of our highway technicians and thousands of miles of right-of-way that we typically did a lot of mowing and treatment on, and took that off their plate, and now they can focus on the integrity of the roadway. Of course, we want to be in compliance with any state or federal regulations, and it's the right thing to do, obviously, and the public loves it. Last year alone, with our mowing reduction, we saved more than $1.8 million. So we've been really aggressive over the last 2 years building our program. There was some uncertainty on the future of our program because we had an election in November. And so we wanted to race the clock and get as many different acres and as many different projects out there that we could. And so just hit on these really quickly. So we have 88 counties in Ohio, which means we have 88 garages. And most of those facilities we're just mowing the grass, so it makes sense for us to do pollinator projects on them. So we're doing that. We have 4 welcome centers as you come into the state of Ohio, and we have 1 project complete. It's an interpretive garden. 2 coming up this year, and then 1 final one in 2 years. As I said, we do public-private partnerships for community and business gateways. We recently finished a project with Honda and started one with Scott's Miracle-Gro. We work with conservation groups and really a variety of different communities and groups to establish gateway projects. Also, we are trying brownfields to blooms. We've established a pollinator habitat on our first brownfield, and so far so good. We're going to be seeding that this winter. We also are trying a new product out. It's a erosion control sock filled with switchgrass straw and milkweed seed, so we can put habitat up on tall, steep slopes and serve a dual purpose, providing more milkweed on the landscape. And of course, our mowing reduction last year. But we see the most growth potential with post-construction. So Ohio has a pretty large reach, especially ODOT, we manage the country's fourth largest interstate system. We manage 19,000 miles of roadsides comprising 260,000 acres of land. And since 2011, we've constructed 8,000 projects. So each year we do about 1,000 projects costing about $2 billion. And for the most part, Ohio is an agrarian state, but we're also very diverse geographically and ecologically. We have 300 miles of shoreline along Lake Erie. We have 2/3 of our state bordered by the Ohio River. To the southeast, we have the forested foothills of the Appalachian Mountains, and we have 6 major metropolitan areas. So what I'm saying is that in Ohio, no two projects are going to be alike. Okay, so far I've covered everything that we're currently doing. Let me talk a minute about the future of our program. In late 2017, we worked with Davie Resource Group to launch a research project to look at our current post-construction ground cover seed mix and develop alternative mixes that meet 3 requirements. So we need them to meet the EPA coverage requirement of 70% within 6 months, provide stormwater benefit, and benefit pollinators. It's been decades since we've updated our seed mix specifications in our book, and we knew that it was long overdue. So designing seed mixes for selective, smaller, more controlled restoration projects is totally different than designing a seed mix for statewide implementation. As you know, establishing and managing vegetation on roadsides can be very challenging. Grasses that are quick to establish don't provide very much wildlife benefit. They crowd out native vegetation, and they don't have the deep root structures that provide that erosion control that natives do. And highly organic, really good soils don't work well when you're building roads because you need stronger soils that can handle the loads that our traffic puts on them. So add to that, in Ohio, we use 600,000 tons of salt each winter fighting snow and ice. And dealing with contractors and engineers can be unwieldy sometimes. So I'll just say that, no offense to those of you in the crowd. So again, as I said, we knew this was going to be a once-in-a-decades opportunity to revise our seed specifications, so we decided to put everything on the table with this research project. And here's what we wanted to get out of this project. So obviously, we want a seed mix that will benefit pollinators, that will be comparable in cost to our existing ground cover, reduce ODOT's maintenance costs, include a mix of native grasses, provide line of sight, enhance aesthetics, and finally provide stormwater benefits. We knew that was a tall order, but and we know that we probably won't hit all of them, but we definitely wanted to try. So in phase 1, Davie has done an extensive literature search on existing ground cover mixes out there, and they've contacted 5 Midwestern DOTs. And they reviewed our current mix and designed alternative mixes that have the potential to meet the goals that I mentioned earlier, and they put everything into a matrix. And as I said, the matrix is out on the share table, so I encourage you to pick one of those up. The matrices compare the current mix that we use with mix from Pheasants Forever, as well as the proposed mix that Davie formed. And it's broken out by infields or meadows, no-mow slopes, wet ditches, back slopes, and clear zone floor slopes. So phase 1 wrapped up in December, and we're currently seeking spending authority for phase 2 field trials. In the field trials, we're going to look at planting methods and performance, and we're going to do a combination of planting methods with this project. We're going to do drill seeding, broadcasting, and hydromulching. And so I'm going to defer to Cheryl and Corinne on this, but when we're doing the field trials, we're doing 4 different tests, 3 sites per test, and that equals 12 test sites across the state. And within those, there's going to be 3 replications at each test site, 6 plots per replication, 2 planting methods per test site, and all 3 seed mixes will be tested. So the sites are going to be monitored at various intervals for the first 3 growing seasons to look at the vegetation coverage, the height, and the diversity in grass and forb and pollinator species. And the intervals will probably be hard for you in the back to read, so let me just go through them really quickly. So in the first growing season, they'll be doing visual assessments on the following days: 30, 60, 90, 120, 150, and 180. And then in the second growing season, they'll do 4 visual assessments, and then in the third growing season, they'll do 3 visual assessments. So the end goal for ODOT with this project is to update our spec book to include new seed mixes that we know will meet the goals that I've talked about. We asked Davey to help us by providing a decision tree so our planners and engineers will know what seeds to use on what projects. And we've also asked for help with training specifically for our project inspectors so they can know the difference between beneficial vegetation and noxious and invasive weeds. But we know that we're going to have some threats to the implementation. As I said earlier, we've learned a lot of important lessons over the years, but I like to think that we are continually improving. This project, or this picture here is very telling. Mike Rutterer took this for us a couple of weeks ago out in the field. It says, wildflower area, no mow, no spray, and clearly they're not observing that. We know that implementing change is always going to be an uphill battle. But some of these are the biggest obstacles we expect to change. Noxious and invasive weed control and woodies. There will always be uncertainty with a new administration. Every 4 years we're going to face this. Change in public opinion, cost restrictions. But most importantly is the availability of green contractors and resistance from general contractors. Currently, the way that we pay our contractors is when they finish a project, they'll seed and straw, and then we'll close the project and pay them out. We know that natives take several years to establish, and so one thing that we're considering doing is having the general contractor put down a cover crop. We'll close the project, and that'll trigger a green contractor to come in and start the process of native vegetation. So all said, over the last 2 years, we've been busy and we've been able to create more than 80,000 acres of suitable habitat. Again, we know we'll always face new challenges, but we know also, and we've learned this from experience, that diversity will provide some certainty for a long-term sustainable program. Restoration, post-construction, interpretive gardens, all those things that I talked about earlier. But despite the project type, we know that one thing that will kill us is failing to control noxious and invasive weeds and woodies. So that's priority number 1 for us. And all the opportunity out there, as I said earlier, 1,000 projects are constructed each year in Ohio. So that's a lot of opportunity for us to do native seeding and skip that step of having to do restoration. So we know that's going to be a game changer. So with that, I'll open it up for questions, and Cheryl and Corinne, if you want to come up here. Question in the back.
In the region, and we're taking a similar approach to any of our landscaping projects. So from bioswale or stormwater BMPs to, we've got a tree program as well that, right, the general contractor, just get them out of the way. They don't want anything to do with the landscaping. And then once that closes, that triggers that green contractor to come in. So that, from our experience, and it's relatively short, at this point, it seems to be the best route for us.
Thank you.
Would you by any chance be willing to share the decision tree?
Yeah, of course, it's going to be public record. This is an ongoing project, so 2022, I believe, is when the project finishes. So the matrices that I talked about earlier are out on the table. That's just one example of the many different ones that were created. But sure, we're willing to share that. Any other questions?
Yeah, thanks, Joel. Great presentation. You mentioned your high priority was controlling the noxious weeds. How are you guys doing that? Is that site prep or follow-up, or how are you guys?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so we do a minimum of 2 herbicide applications. We won't rush into a site just to do it. We want to make sure that we've controlled all the noxious bases. 1 minute. We have 2 mowings the first year, and we're really gearing up. We had a situation a few years ago where we got rid of a lot of our spray equipment, and so we're trying to, train more people to do spraying for us and focus on targeted herbicides.
And then a follow-up comment, also based on the question or the comment in the back. We hear about these general contractors not really wanting to get on board, and I'm really wondering why. This seems to be the future. Comments on that?
I think so far we've, and just floating this with the construction administration office, is that it's new, it's different. Contractors want to be paid, and they don't want to be held up for 3 or 4 years for establishment. That's just what it comes down to. So we need to work with the construction, bureau or whatever, of all the general contractors and get their buy-in before, obviously, we make any serious plans for implementation.
That contractor, once they're done with, they get to substantial completion, they want release on that bond. They want that bond back. So that's the big thing, is holding that bond open for another 3-4 years to get, the establishment that you want on a $30 million job for $100,000 worth of work. So, just get them out of the equation, bring in somebody who's dedicated to that and can only, that's their primary goal. And that's where we find we get the best success.
I really do encourage you to visit with Cheryl and Corinne to ask questions about the research project. They uncovered a lot of really interesting information.
We have one last question.
Okay.
The pressure is too much. So 2 questions. First, on the invasive species component, a lot of federal highway funds require a endangered species review before you do any grading work. At Ohio, do you guys go in and look at the invasive species, bush honeysuckle, Scherichia lespedeza, Caloripara, all those kind of things, and do you inventory those and put that into your 3 years, like a 3-year follow-up stewardship when that road's completed? That's my first question. And the second question, as a native contractor, I love when a general contractor can't figure out how to do the native stuff, because they just can't. They can't get their head around it. So in answer to, to follow up, that 3-year stewardship program really makes the most sense. And it makes the most sense for 2 reasons. Not only do the native seeds have to get in the ground at the right time, I can't tell you how many municipal engineers and general contractors I've had to tell, look, you had us seeded in June. The native seeds aren't going to germinate until April, and they just can't get their heads around it being a whole year. Our Metropolitan Sewer District won't sign off on a project until it's been green for 30 days. So thank God for annual rye or spring oats, because they can't tell the difference between that and Rebecca or anything else. So it's a real challenge educating the engineering component to understand that time frame. So my question really is, have you looked at a 3-year stewardship program, not only for invasives, but also establishment of your native corridor?
I know I'm way past my time, so I'm just going to address the first question. So noxious weeds, always invasives when we can. Our list of noxious weeds just grew by 12 species this year, so we're very busy with that. And we have 40 hours in the work week, and our priority is from the center line out. Unfortunately, roadsides are always last. So again, being an agrarian community, we don't want weeds to jump the fence and get into farmland. So that's priority number 1, are the noxious weeds. And we don't have a stewardship program yet, but these are things that we're going to figure out over the 3 years that we're doing field trials and the best way to implement it. Okay, thank you all.